No, I want to do this first. Let's do the SEC media poll first, okay? Garrett, you have that. This is an image from their website, from the Twitter feed. This is the SEC media predictions. We had one of those, of course, in Arlington. No surprise, the top picks are Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky right below Georgia, and then A&M at number 2, and then everyone else according to what was the voting. Here is the breakdown of the votes. Georgia heavily picked to win the East, and Alabama massive. Like, think about Alabama, 177 of 181 votes for them to win, and of course Georgia's right there at 172. Now the votes for the SEC champion, Alabama, dominant vote. South Carolina, Spencer Rattler have something to do with that one, Beamer. And then Vanderbilt gets a vote, and so does Texas A&M.
Man, somebody's really likes Clark Lee or just decided to be a troll there because
that's definitely trolling.
Yeah,
that's definitely trolling.
And there might be 3 on South Carolina. Look, Spencer Rattler is better than, probably more talented than any quarterback they've had in a long time at South Carolina. And Shane Beamer is an exciting young new coach, but that's 2 teams in there that have never won a conference title ever. And then Texas A&M is in there, and they've not won the SEC title. Now they've won conference titles in other conferences that they've been in the Southwest Conference.
When
and
was
won in
their
the
last Big 12
1998.
title? Yeah.
So it's been a long time.
You wouldn't think so by the way they talk sometimes, man. Golly, it's 1998, but you would not have thought that based on the conversations over the years.
Yeah, no, Dat Win was on the team, back then.
He's retired and owns a bunch of Chick-fil-A franchises now. I mean, that's how long that's been.
Yeah, so it's a bit different. So they've got a long time. So it's surprising to me to see anybody on that list who's never won the SEC before. Now I get that A&M is on the climb and on the rise, and they've got a coach who's won a national title before and conference titles before, at his previous stop. So that stands to reason. But I mean, come on. 3 for South Carolina, 1 for Vanderbilt. That's
I picture some Vandy beat writer. I don't know, maybe a dude fresh or still in college, just like, see what I did? I'm that guy. Like, that's the only thing I can imagine, because I can't imagine somebody straight faced actually doing that. That has to be bait. Well, I don't know when their votes were supposed to be in, so I'm not sure if that was before the comments about ultimately being the best team that everybody laughed at, or if that was prior to it. But yeah, I'm not putting much stock in that one vote. The South Carolina thing, I mean, I think Shane Beamer's got some positivity flowing through there. I'm not ready, especially in that East right now, to put anybody over Georgia. I just don't think that makes any sense. But Spencer Rattler is one of those guys that I am very curious to see play this year, because he has flown under the radar. I mean, compared to the way he was being talked about even a year ago, right? I mean, he was at one point in time that super 5-star recruit that was on a Netflix show that – I remember my little sister hated Spencer Rattler before he ever played for OU because she watched him on Netflix and thought he was the cockiest SOB she'd ever seen. And she hated him. And that just made her more frustrated watching Oklahoma whenever he'd make mistakes. See, I told you, he sucks or whatever, but kid's got an immense amount of talent, or a young man's got an immense amount of talent. He's got a head coach that he's comfortable with in Shane Beamer. He's got some toys, and I'm just really fascinated to see what they do. If they were in another conference, I think they'd be talked about more, but the fact they're in the SEC kind of dampens expectations right from the outset.
If they're in the ACC, I would say, I mean, Spencer Rattler can come in there and make a huge difference in a conference that's not as talent-heavy as the SEC is. And, lest we forget, Spencer Rattler ended 2020 on a point where people thought, like, crap, this kid is really going to be something. And then, for whatever reason, and he wasn't. He's such a conundrum, because he wasn't terrible. He just wasn't. He was like stuck in neutral.
Yeah. And there's also a kid named Caleb Williams.
Yeah, behind him. Yeah, behind
him.
Who
came in a massively watched game.
Yep.
And
made incredible plays.
Superstar.
Yeah, I mean, the Texas game. He came in during the Texas game. Spencer Rattler looked like he was a deer in the headlights and looked anything but a 5-star. And, Caleb Williams comes in there when they needed it the most. And Riley just says, screw it. I mean, if they didn't put Caleb Williams in at that point when they did, or if they had not at all, I mean, what does that final score look like? Because, I mean, he was a miracle man with what he came in and did. And so, the star was born with Caleb Williams. And, Rattler didn't disappear ultimately right then, but he faded away for sure. And the future in Norman faded away pretty quickly. But then Caleb Williams did as well. And that's where they are without either one of those guys. It's just kind of weird how that goes. But, yeah, I'm really curious to see Rattler, especially being in a place where, again, he's got some comfortable pieces around him, and he's been able to fly under the radar a little bit. I mean, you think about it, he's been talked about and whatnot, but it's not like if he was the Oklahoma quarterback when he was being talked about. So I think that bodes well for him. Now, the other part of that I want to ask, Paul, you're the A&M fan, and I don't mean this disrespectfully. I mean this because I'm very curious. But what is the climb for A&M? Because the last few years, 8 wins, 9 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins, 8 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins. I mean, they are not climbing or falling. They are in the exact same spot for the last 10 years.
I guess I should have said they feel like they're on the climb.
Right, but I want to ask why. Like, why is this year going to be the year? Because we've been hearing about the building now for a while. Like, we heard it. Like, someone got some things going, and then all of a sudden that just fell apart real quickly. And then the big, huge hire, big money hire with Jimbo, and they've been good. But just like, what is, I mean, 3 bowl wins in a row, winning, an Orange Bowl. I mean, that's huge. But, like, where does it not an Orange Bowl, but what bowl game were they in last year?
Were they the Citrus last year?
Citrus, okay.
Something like that,
I guess. All right. So, Orange Bowl a couple years back. What is the expectation? Like, is it 8 or 9 wins going to be, yeah, it was still the same record, but we won this game? Like, you know what I'm saying?
I think they feel that the confluence of events is happening now because they beat Alabama last year, which they'd done once before, but they beat Alabama without a
withdrew from the Gator. Is that what it was?
From the Gator, yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So they beat Alabama last year with Zach Calzada at quarterback. So it wasn't the first time they beat Alabama with a generational talent college football superstar in Johnny Manziel. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of emboldens them to say, okay, well, everything around the quarterback has gotten better now. The recruiting is better than it's ever been, numbers-wise. And the guy who is doing that actually has some skins on the wall as a coordinator and a head coach when it comes to actually doing that. It's not this is Jimbo's, 4th year right now? So his 3rd year at Florida State, his 4th year at Florida State was fifth year. So his 3rd, 4th year at FSU was when they really got going, and he also didn't have to rebuild that out of nothing. That was Florida State was.
Let's get to what his question is.
So I think it's the confluence of those events. That's why they think that this is the time, but I would caution them against that. Alabama hasn't slipped far back enough to where you can maybe go beat Alabama again. Maybe you'll do it this year. Maybe you beat them 2 times in a row because you've got some talent maybe equally stacked across the board at some key positions. But Alabama also has to lose again relatively for you to be comfortable, and then you also can't lose. You can't lose a dud again.
You can't lose to Mississippi State. You can't lose to somebody else.
So here it's 2012 is when they beat Alabama, right?
Yeah,
with Johnny Manziel.
Yep.
So they won 11 games that year. And this is not a knock on A&M. This is me trying to figure out, because every year there's hype, and they just got this #1 recruiting class, and I'm just asking, when's the leap? And I know that the leap has been stopped or blocked by – well, we got to play Alabama, we got to play Auburn, we got to play LSU, and I know they've ran into some monstrous all-timer teams during that point during that stretch. But at some point, don't you have to get over that hump?
Like Michigan,
you have to,
last year with Michigan,
right? So since Johnny, 9-4, 8-5, 8-5, 8-5, 7-6, 9-4, 8-5, 9-1 COVID year, 8-4. I mean, that is as not 500. That is as steady as it gets. I mean, that's pretty much not wavering one way or the other off of that 8-win mark, save for a little blip here and there. That's what I'm just curious about is when do they get over that hump, and when are they so prepared and ready enough? Does this #1 all-time recruiting class need a couple years? You know what I'm saying? Because every year it's there's a little something. So what is it this year that is needed?
Well,
they
need to win, and not just win a big game. They need to win the ones they're supposed to win. But here's go back to that poll again. Now think about this. This came while you were discussing this, both of you. I want you to go back to this poll. The SEC is a very powerful conference, correct? Mm-hmm. They have 2 incredibly good teams that have won national championships, Alabama, a chunk of them, and then there's been others along the way, whether it's LSU or Auburn, or Florida. But think about this. If it's such a great league, yet 349 votes out of whatever combined crush everybody.
Yeah.
Now, A&M's not that far really behind, but look at the overall first place votes. 177-3. Where is like the upper depth?
I mean, it's there. I think it's the fact that it's just two very
just
obvious top
unbelievable.
pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why I get some of what A&M's frustrations are, is that they do have these juggernauts like an Alabama and a Georgia, and their schedule's tough, but like so's Alabama's schedule. So that's what I'm saying is like, what do you need to be Alabama to knock them off their perch?
You have to win the division. You need to win,
right?
Whether you beat them or not. Win a division.
Well, I know how you technically on paper do it, but I'm saying, how do they then do that and do that and translate that to paper?
The biggest thing is, and look, and even if they go and lose to Alabama, that's just one loss. If Alabama finds a way to lose two, but you can't lose two. You have to lose one.
You can't lose to Mississippi State.
Yeah, and you can't. Like last year, okay, Arkansas was a surprisingly good team, and they had a long streak against Arkansas that had to come to an end eventually. So that kind of okay. You can't lose to a Mississippi State team that's just okay, and you can't lose to LSU after they fired their coach. Yeah. Now you can lose to Arkansas and Ole Miss. All right, those are pretty darn good teams, but you can't lose. If you're an elite team, you don't lose to middle of the road or teams that fire their coach.
Yeah, no, the next step for them is to actually win the division, and that means you have to beat the team that has stranglehold on college football for a decade.
Or win 10 games.
Or go
in the regular
or get
season
in the playoff
as
as another representative in the SEC, and you hope that maybe Georgia's down a notch so that you get that spot. Remember, in the COVID year, they were 9-1. They were really good. But they got blocked out there that year. All right, so that's the SEC media poll. It's a great question, and I'm sure, quite frankly, that A&M and all the above, that's the question you ask all the time. It's like Michigan. And not that they were elite consistently, but they were good, and then every time you thought they were pretty good, they'd get smoked by Ohio State.
And look,
finally beat the Buckeyes.
I can tell you, looking at A&M's schedule right now, they can go. There's 3 games they're probably going to win. But if South Carolina's better, and they already lost to Mississippi State last year, the rest of their schedule is tough.
It's you're right.
Miami's going to be fun. I mean, we'll see early on. That'll be an interesting game.
So there's some great, and you always get kind of a barometer with. I love them. The early, really intense, highly rated teams that meet each other in non-conference in the month of September.
You do? Well, that's going to go away.